it's good to have all of your materials ready to go before you start. And so these have all been arranged magically by Kaylee. And so first we have the clay. Well, first we'll start with the sand. So this is masonry sand that we're going to be using for the cob. And here we have clayey subsoil. And this clayey subsoil has been sifted and then it has been soaked in a barrel. And so we like to use it in this soaked state. It just combines a little bit easier. And then we have straw, and I have in the past always just purchased straw bales, but this is called easy straw. And it's a little easier to deal with, and it's actually, the straw pieces are a little bit shorter, which I think is not the most ideal thing for cob, but it's really nice for plaster, and it definitely makes it easier to tuck the straw in when you're actually working with it for bas relief, which is kind of nice. But ideally I would have a little bit of longer fibers, but this is just so easy to deal with. I just put it in the shed and took it out and I didn't get straw everywhere. So there's a reason why they have this gimmick, easy straw. Finally, no mess. Yes, here we go. And then here is some wheat paste that Kaylee, who you will soon be seeing on camera, just made. And this is great wheat paste made directly with the recipe on the Wild Abundance blog, on the Earth and Paint blog. And then this is the right proportion of water. This is hydrated lime, and this hydrated lime was hydrated with water, but then it dried out, and so I added more water, but it really needs to be mixed better and soaked for longer. But ideally it's more like a paste when you add it, just so you know. So you take that powder, you add water to it, and you use a drill mixer attachment to really make it into a nice paste, and then keep water over it so that it does not dry out, unlike me who let it dry out. These are the proportions that we are going to be mixing up. And these proportions are specific to our clay subsoil. So your clay subsoil will yield different proportions that you will find out by making cookies, as described in a couple videos back. So for our soil, we are using 2 3/4 part sand, 1 part clay, 1/3 part water, 1/4 part wheat paste, and 1/16 part lime. Now, what this means as far as amounts, so this is parts, and for our part for right now, we're using 1.5 gallons. So 1 part is 1.5 gallons. If you're making a small batch, like for a sample, this might be 1 part equals 1 cup. If you are making, which is very convenient with this 1/16, because 1/16 of a cup happens to be a tablespoon, which is amazing. And 1/16 of a gallon happens to be a cup. It's like someone was thinking there. But yeah, so your part could be a cup, it could be a gallon, it could be a half gallon. We're going to make a reasonably big batch. And so 2.75 parts of sand becomes 4 1/8 gallon sand. 1 part clay becomes 1.5 gallons clay. 1/3 part water becomes oh, that's wrong. Oh no. Because if it's 1.5 gallons, then 1/3 part water would be 1/3 of a gallon plus a half of a third, which would be 1/6 of a gallon. So this should actually be 4/6 or 2/3 of a gallon of water, which whatever. 2/3 of a gallon, which is going to be about 10 1/3 cups, because there's 16 cups in a gallon. And then 6 cups of wheat paste is going to be 6 cups of wheat paste is going to be 1.5 or 1/4 part, with a part being a gallon and a half. And then 1/16 part lime becomes 1.5 cups lime, because we're doing a part is a gallon and a half, and 1/16 of a gallon is a cup. And so we're doing 1.5 cups lime. If you're glazing over on the math, don't worry about it too much. It's not scientific. It'll be okay. As long as you do the same as you did with your cookies. So first we're going to add the sand, and this is Kaylee, and Kaylee is assisting in this cob building, and she has been doing a bunch of cob in the cabin because we have all this chinking in the log cabin that we're having to replace. So she is very familiar with this process. So we're going to put that on the tarp. And so that was how many gallons?
That was 4 and a little bit.
Yeah, let's get the, do you mind grabbing the sketch? So we put the sand on there, and then I kind of stamped the sand around. So 4 1/8 gallons. So 4 gallons plus 2 cups. But you don't really have to know the exact amounts. What you're really going for is the proportions, and your proportions are going to be unique to your clay subsoil. Okay, so then we kind of want to make sure that the clay gets evenly distributed. Okay, so this clay. So the clay, ideally you get it evenly distributed throughout the sand, because that's going to make it easier to mix it if you start with it pretty spread out. And as you can see, our clay is pre-hydrated. So I wash my hands because it's really nice to not get clay and goopy, all this stuff, especially not the wheat paste, onto the tarp, because then it makes it very hard to mix. And this is a technique that I did not learn when I first started natural building, and it makes everything so much easier. So you have a dance partner and we're going to dance. So you lift one side, lift the other side. Now I'm going to make a little depression in the clay. It's kind of like making pasta. And then I'm going to drizzle this water into that depression. And then we're going to mix again. And it's pretty funny because we're on a little bit of a slope. Ideally, you and your dance partner are at the same level with each other, because otherwise, as you're doing this whole dancing move, the cob tends to go towards the downhill person. Although I guess if you were unmatched in height, a hill could be beneficial, but we're pretty matched in height, so it's a little funny, but that's okay. So here we're doing this dancing part, which technically I call the or because it's like So now we're going to add in wheat paste. And this is not necessary. This is not necessary if you are going to be using this wheat paste for building a building. This is more necessary if you are doing bas relief with the wheat paste, and or if you are doing chinking. And really, we could just add either the wheat paste or the lime, the hydrated lime. But we're going to do both. Make it extra burly. And then we are going to continue with the rah. So here I'm adding the lime, and there's so little of the lime that we add that it's important to get it all distributed. But this lime, it's like a magical powder. It does really amazing things, even in these small quantities. And this lime is caustic, so I'm really careful to not touch it with my fingers. And once it's mixed in, the amount of lime is so low that I will touch this, but if I'm working with it all day, I would use gloves. And then again, we shall mix. water for a second. As we mix, the consistency of this is really changing. And so this is the first step in stomping cob, is to mix it up like this, because we're able to get the ingredients really well distributed. And then we're going to start stomping it. So now we are going to be stomping the cob. And so it seems like the cob is really dry, but as we stomp it, the clay really starts to come out. It also looks very, very sandy before we stomp it and before the water really comes in. And now we're going to be really aligning. So the stomping really aligns all of those clay particles. And you know, although this was the perfect proportion the other day, I think something is different with the humidity or something. And today we need to add a little more water. It's really easy to add too much water. So you need to be really careful with how much water you add, because it's really easy to make it too wet. And if it's too wet, it's much more likely to crumble. Wow, yeah, even that little bit of water makes a big difference. And so basically you're doing the twist. You're aligning, it's kind of like kneading bread. You're aligning all those clay particles. And you can see as we add the water and as we're stomping it, it looks really clayey. Even though this has 2 3/4 parts sand to 1 part clay. We're going to add even a little bit more water to this batch. And that's just something about the day. It's just, and this whole thing, like, because we're working with so many different factors, like, it's all pretty mysterious. And this is a pretty new thing, using rubber boots to stomp the cob. I've always just done it barefoot, but we've been doing it here in the wintertime, and it's like, oh my God, use rubber boots and then you don't have to wash off your feet. So it just like works so much better. Traditionally, it's usually done barefoot. Also, if you do it barefoot, sometimes even if you sift the clay before you add it to the water to pre-soak, there'll be little tiny rocks. And those little tiny rocks can really do a number on your feet. So it's really nice if you can keep them wear boots. And so, yeah, that little extra water is really making it happen easier. And I mean, the whole thing, the whole squishing and aligning the particles and all that, it definitely happens easier if there's more water. But like I said, the more water you have, the more cracky your cob can be and the less stable it will be. So we really try to add minimal water and maximize the stomping around, which, you know, again, could be accomplished by cows in a contained paddock. This, yeah. And so now, with it all distributed like this, we are going to be adding straw. So you can see how this just looks so much more orange. It looks so much more clay. Even though we haven't added more clay, we're just adding more water. And so that water just really brings out the clay. And so you can sprinkle it on too. We're gonna, with it all, the clay all spread out like this, we're gonna be sprinkling straw on it. So it's really like a light layer everywhere, pretty evenly distributed. In order to make like a straw sandwich and kind of taco this clay up, we're going to grab the tarp. We're standing on the inside. We're grabbing the tarp like this and rolling it in. If you do it the other way and you try to get back here and push the hay like this, you're going to hurt your back. It's much better to come in than go out. So we do that, and then we're going to stomp it stomp, 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 twist and shout and stomp. Pretty exciting. Sorry, got your butt there. Okay, so spreading it out, twisting, aligning those clay particles. Okay, and then once all that straw has been mixed in, we're going to add more straw. And there may be reasons why you're adding less straw or more straw to a given batch of clay. Like I said, for the cob oven, the cob on the inside, the innermost part of the cob, has no straw. Okay, and then we're going to fold it over. And then we're going to start again. Totally done this by myself a ton. Way more fun with a partner, and it works way better with the tarp to have a partner too. Okay, so often I add straw 3 times. This is looking pretty good. So this is looking pretty good. I'm seeing straw throughout. This is kind of what we're looking for as far as how much straw to how much cob. So I'm liking the look of that. This is an awesome batch of cob. It really has a nice plastic feel to it. It's like gonna hold its shape nicely, and it's not so clay that it's gonna crack all crazy. So that's feeling good to me. So at this point, we're just gonna put it in buckets and bring it in to where we are working with it.